Their legacy is not carved in stone, but written in our very DNA. In the instinct to soothe a crying child, to bring soup to a sick friend, to simply sit with the suffering when there is nothing left to be done. They are the ghosts of our better angels. It is the third time this week. Each chime hangs in the cold air, a metal seed of fear planting itself in every heart that hears it. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This is not a history of grand battles, of kings crowned in echoing cathedrals, or knights in shining steel. This is a history of the dark, the quiet, and the forgotten. That is a gilded cage, a story told to distract from the truth. This is a story of the other 99%. It is the story of you. It lives in the gnawing hunger of a long winter, in the profound relief of a harvest brought in just before the rains. It is felt in the scratch of a wool tunic on your skin, the one you've worn for a month. It is tasted in the thin, sour ale that is safer to drink than the water. This is the great, invisible economy of faith, a system of spiritual debts and credits that binds the living and the dead together. The world has changed so little in your lifetime. The same bells ring, the same seasons turn, the same hunger comes in winter. Your life will leave no monument, no book, no grand legacy. Your story is written only in the memories of those who knew you, and those memories are as mortal as you are. Your knowledge of anatomy is not based on charts or scalpels, but on analogies, on a poetry of the flesh. The body is a garden where four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, must be kept in perfect balance. It is a microcosm of the universe, with its own tides, its own seasons, its own internal weather. You don't look for a diseased organ. You look for imbalance, for a system out of harmony. You lead the man into your small hut, away from the prying eyes of the village. A journey to a shrine is not a holiday. It is a desperate act of hope, a physical prayer. The more arduous the journey, the more potent the prayer. We see this as superstition, a misunderstanding of cause and effect. But we miss the point. For them, it was a way of taking action in a world where they were otherwise powerless. You cannot fight a fever with logic. You cannot bargain with a plague. But you can walk for 3 days. You can kiss a relic. You learn to read the signs of desperation, the family that stops coming to church, too weak or too ashamed, the smoke that no longer rises from a chimney, the sudden disappearance of a stray dog. One night, you wake to a sound, a furtive scratching at the small buried root cellar outside. Your husband is instantly awake, his hand reaching for a heavy wood axe. Fear, cold and sharp, floods your chest. It's likely not a wolf. It's a neighbor, someone you know, someone whose children play with the other village children. Your wealth isn't locked away. It is eaten, it is burned, it is lived. This system is far more than pre-capitalist economics. It is a social contract signed in sweat and sealed with shared vulnerability. Each exchange is a renewal of a vow. Payment is not a transaction that ends a relationship, but a ritual that deepens it, lashing you ever tighter to the fate of your neighbors. By accepting that small sack of salt, you accept a bond with the family who traded a winter cloak for it. We must also see the astonishing resilience of the human spirit, its ability to find meaning, beauty, and even joy in the most unforgiving of circumstances. They were not so different from us. They loved their children, feared death, and hoped for a better life, even if they could not imagine what that life might look like. What we gain when we study these ordinary, vanished people is a profound sense of perspective. We see how our own anxieties about the future, our own struggles for meaning, are not new. They are echoes. To be without a lord, without kin, is to be a broken thing, a dangerous anomaly. It suggests he is fleeing from something, a crime, a debt, a plague. This is the harsh reality of xenophobia, born not of malice, but of a desperate need for security. In a world without police or reliable information, the only safety is in the familiar. Every outsider represents a potential threat to the fragile equilibrium of the village. They could be carrying the sweating sickness that wiped out the next village over. They could be a spy for a rival lord. And she learned from her mother, who learned from hers. This chain of knowledge, whispered from one generation of women to the next, is your most precious inheritance. It is also your most dangerous secret. It is a lineage of women who watched, who listened, and who remembered. A lineage that operates in parallel to the patrilineal world of lords, priests, and property. This knowledge carries a heavy price. It sets you apart. While other women's lives are defined by marriage, childbirth, and the endless cycle of domestic labor, yours is defined by this secret craft. Doe 4. The Saint in the Stone. Your cow, your only cow, is sick. The milk is thin and sour, and she won't eat. The priest has already been sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers to St. Francis, the patron of animals. But nothing has changed. Your husband is grim, already calculating the loss, the brutal math of winter survival. But you have one more hope. It's not a hope you speak of in front of the priest. Section 7. Healing Body, Mending Mind. The knock on your door is not the frantic pound of a man with a gored leg, nor the urgent rap of a woman whose labor has begun too soon. It is a ghost's tap, hesitant and soft, a sound almost swallowed by the wind. You open the door to a boy named Thomas. Though he has a man's shoulders from years of scything, he has no fever. His skin is not slick with the sweat of plague. You remember young Thomas, whose arm went black from a splinter, and the old weaver who coughed his lungs out into a bloody rag. Each one a lesson in humility. Every successful healing was a minor miracle, a testament not to sterile procedure, but to the raw, ferocious resilience of the human body. As you make the first careful cut, you aren't thinking of science. You are thinking of the moon's phase, of the prayer you whispered over your herbs this morning, of the desperate hope that Elspeth's own life force is stronger than the encroaching corruption. Your life was a testament to a timeless truth, a truth you lived with every dawn you greeted and every fever you fought. They feared the devil's breath on the wind and the failure of the harvest, but still you planted in hope. And in the face of that overwhelming darkness, you knew the greatest medicine of all was not found in a vial or a prayer book. It was hope itself. They left no monuments, these quiet practitioners of possibility. The taste of iron is on your tongue. It isn't blood. It's the water from the well, drawn this morning before the sun broke the hard line of the horizon. In the darkness of your hut, the damp wool of your blanket scratches your chin, a familiar and constant irritation, like a sin you can't quite confess. From the far end of the village, a single bell tolls, not for prayer, but for the passing of another soul. First thing you feel is the cold seeping up from the packed earth floor through the thin straw of your mattress. A single low bell tolls from the distant church, not marking the hour, but warning of a frost that will bite deep into the coming dawn. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This isn't a story of kings in their castles or knights clashing in sunlit tournaments. You think of purgatory, the waiting room of the afterlife, where souls are cleansed by fire before they can enter heaven. It is a place of suffering, but also of hope. And your actions now, in this life, can shorten your time there. You give a small coin to a traveling friar, not just out of charity, but as an investment in your own salvation. You pray for the souls of your dead, and you know that your children will one day pray for yours. The real sickness, you realize, is not just in the blood. It is in the soul of the community. When survival is at stake and the enemy is invisible, who do you trust? Who do you blame when God himself seems to be the one holding the scythe? A farmer comes to you, his face pale and his side aching. You are the village healer, the woman of herbs and lore. You have never seen the inside of a human body. Dissection is a mortal sin, an unforgivable violation of God's temple. But in Eleanor's eyes, there is not defeat, but a strange, fierce peace. She did what she could. She made her appeal to the highest court she knew. This is a world where faith is profoundly physical. God is not an abstract concept. His power is manifest in the world through objects you can see and touch. A saint is not just a story. He is a supernatural patron whose physical remains still hold his power, his virtus. This belief creates a spiritual geography. Certain places are holier than others. You see the bitter irony in his sermons on the blessedness of want. Survival rewrites morality. The neighbor whose fire you borrowed a coal from in November now looks at your dwindling pile of firewood with eyes that are sharp and calculating. The communal spirit of the harvest, the shared work and song, has evaporated. It has been replaced by a quiet, desperate individualism. A fence is mended, not to keep animals out, but to keep neighbors from seeing what little you have left. It comes as a bundle of dry firewood left silently by your cottage, a promise of warmth against the coming chill. It is the feel of a neighbor's strong hands beside your own, helping to patch the leaky thatch of your roof before the autumn rains begin in earnest. Your skill, your knowledge of herbs and bones, is not a service to be sold. It is a thread woven into the village's great and sacred tapestry, a gift economy built on a foundation of reciprocal obligation and unspoken trust. Their hopes were smaller, more immediate. A good harvest, a healthy child, another spring. And yet, their resilience, their endless toil, their stubborn refusal to give up in the face of plague, famine, and war, is the foundation upon which our modern world is built. They are the forgotten architects of everything we are. We look back at them across a chasm of centuries and see a world of darkness, ignorance, and brutality. And we are not wrong, but we miss the truth if we only see that. A soldier returning from a forgotten war? Or is he something worse? A thief, a bearer of disease, a harbinger of bad luck. Fear of the unknown is the deepest fear of all, and this man is its living embodiment. He asks for work, for a place to sleep. The village elder, the reeve, questions him. Where is he from? Who are his people? Who is his lord? The stranger's answers are vague. He is from the south. His family is gone. He serves no lord. Each answer deepens the suspicion. They find affection in shared hardship, comfort in familiar routine. But the question remains, a ghost at the feast. What happens to a soul that is never asked what it wants? It learns, perhaps, not to want at all. As Section 8, The Price of Knowledge. Where did you learn to mix a sleep draught from hops and valerian root? It was your mother, her hands guiding yours as she crushed the dried petals, her voice a low murmur explaining which leaves calm a fever and which ones can stop a woman's bleeding. This is the great unspoken truth of the age. Faith is tested, not by demons, but by an empty stomach. The fear of hell is a distant threat compared to the immediate certainty of starvation. Was it their faith that saw them through? Or was it a pragmatism so brutal they dared not speak its name? You look at your dwindling supply, and you don't pray for a miracle. You pray for the strength to do what must be done, and for God to look the other way. You have won this small battle, easing a pain the heavens seemed content to inflict. But the question hangs in the air, more chilling than the coming night. In a world where God's will is absolute, is it a blessing to defy it, or a damnation? Without a concept of microscopic life, cleanliness was a ritual of symbolism as much as function. A healer's work was a constant battle against an invisible tide of infection, fought with the most rudimentary weapons. You lean over Elspeth, the smell of wine mingling with the scent of fear and sickness. Her mother clutches a wooden cross in the corner, her lips moving in a silent, frantic prayer to a saint you know has failed her before. Every healer carries the ghosts of their failures. We are still terrified of the things we cannot control: illness, aging, the finality of death. We have simply rebranded our search for meaning. We have traded the village healer for the wellness influencer, the saint's relic for the superfood. But the fundamental human need remains unchanged, beating like a frightened heart beneath the floorboards of progress. The desperate desire for someone to look us in the eye and tell us that there is something, anything, that can be done. You, the medieval healer, knew this in your bones. But we forget the profound human cost of being the one everyone depends on, the one who can never afford the luxury of weakness. Ask yourself, what is the true price of being indispensable? To be the pillar that holds up the roof, but to stand alone in the dark when the feast is over. To bear witness, Thomas's wife arrives, her face a mask of disbelief. Her eyes ask you a question she cannot bring herself to speak. What do you tell her? Ask yourself, do you offer the false comfort of a prayer, a story of a saint who healed a similar wound? Or do you meet her gaze and let her see the truth in your own, the hollow knowledge that your true work here has just begun, and it has nothing to do with medicine? The priest has taught you about the good death, the ars moriendi. It is an art, a final performance. To die a good death, you must be in a state of grace, having confessed your sins and received the last rites. You must be at peace with God and with your neighbors. To die suddenly, without preparation, in an accident or in your sleep, is a terrifying prospect. It means facing judgment with a soul still stained by unconfessed sins. You pray every night, not for a longer life, but for a good death. A neighbor puts a strange, twisted cross on his door, a folk charm to ward off the evil eye, and is accused of witchcraft. The old stories about goats being companions to the devil are revived, and people begin killing the animals in a frenzy of superstitious terror. The social fabric, already thin from hunger, now tears apart completely. Every cough is a potential death sentence. Every neighbor is a potential carrier. The communal bonds of the village evaporate, replaced by a universal, atomizing fear. It is every family for itself. It is a concentration of holiness, a direct conduit to the power of heaven. Your neighbor, Eleanor, whose son has been wasting away with a lung sickness, sold her only goat to make a pilgrimage to a cathedral 3 days' walk away. She went to see the finger bone of a martyr, believing that proximity to such a holy object could burn the sickness out of her child. She came back, exhausted and penniless, clutching a small lead badge to prove she had been there. Her son's coughing has not eased. No one does. It is a shared, unspoken dread, a ghost at every table. To speak of it is to give it power, to admit defeat. Instead, people talk of the weather, of the Lord's new taxes, of a fox seen near the chicken coop. They talk of anything but the gnawing emptiness inside them. The church teaches that suffering is holy, a test of faith that purifies the soul. Gluttony is a sin, and so, by extension, hunger must be a virtue. But the priest is not thin. His cheeks are ruddy, his cassock snug. She looks you in the eye, a silent ledger of debt and gratitude passing between you. And then she is gone, leaving you with a wealth you can taste. You never ask for coin. Coin is a phantom, a story told by merchants and bailiffs who ride through once a season. It is the cold blood of lords, hoarded in chests, counted in darkness. Your payment is life itself. It arrives not with a jingle, but with the slap of a fresh-caught string of river trout on your doorstep at dawn. Every time you taught a child how to tie a knot, how to find north by the stars, how to tell which mushrooms are safe to eat, you were building the future. These small, unrecorded acts of love and labor are the invisible mortar that holds the great cathedrals of history together. Without them, everything would collapse into dust. The world they built was not the one they envisioned. They prayed for salvation and feared damnation, never dreaming of a future of science, of cities of light, of people who would read their story on a glowing screen. And in your world, stranger is a word that tastes of fear. Your community is a closed circle, an island in a sea of unknown dangers. Your survival depends on mutual trust, on knowing the history and kinship of every person around you. This man has no history here. He is a blank space, a question mark. The children stop their games and stare. The women at the well fall silent, their gossip turning to suspicious whispers. The men in the fields grip their tools a little tighter. Who is he? A pilgrim? The runaway serf? But in the dark hours of the night, it feels more like a sacrifice. Your lifeblood poured out in service of a name, a field, a legacy that will never be yours. There's a deep, historical melancholy in the reality of medieval marriage for ordinary people. It was the central pillar of society, the mechanism for transferring property and ensuring stability. But it was built on the silent subjugation of women, on the denial of their choice, their desire, and their autonomy. Was it possible to find happiness, or even just contentment, within such rigid confines? Perhaps. Humans are resilient. You see the way your neighbor looks at your scrawny chicken. You see it because you look at his withered stores the same way. The 10 Commandments, read aloud by the priest in the warm church, feel like a story from a different, sunnier world. Thou shalt not steal is a simple rule in times of plenty. But when your child's lips are blue with cold and their cries are weak from lack of food, sin is just another word for survival. We see a divide between science and faith today, but then the lines were far more tangled. A cure that works too well is more suspicious than one that fails. A failure is God's will. A startling recovery? That could be a divine gift, a sign of your own piety. Or it could be a diabolical trick, a bargain made with things that dwell in the deep woods and silent places. He turns and leaves without another word, his shadow receding, leaving you alone with the boy's now steadying breath. You pour a splash over your hands, feeling the sharp sting, then over the small, sharp knife you will use to cut away the dead flesh. You don't know about germs or bacteria. Those are concepts for another world, words that sound like a wizard's incantation. But you know that rot and decay are the enemies of flesh. You know that fire and the potent spirits of the grape can hold them at bay. This is your arsenal: water, fire, and wine. This is the razor's edge of medieval medicine. We have replaced the four humors with hormones and gut biomes, the whispers of demons with the clinical language of depression, the herbal charm with the prescription pill. Our knowledge is vaster, our tools infinitely more powerful. Our world is lit by screens, not by tallow. And yet, we still seek gurus who offer ancient wellness secrets whispered from a mountaintop. We still place our fragile faith in a new diet, a charged crystal, or a repeated mantra to ward off the encroaching chaos of modern life. You see the families gathering for a christening feast, but your threshold remains uncrossed. They bring you their pain as an offering, but shield you from their happiness, as if your connection to the veil between worlds might curdle the ale or sour the celebration. Your life is a service, a covenant you made with a knowledge that chose you more than you chose it. But it is a solitary one. In our hyper-connected world, we romanticize the idea of a singular, all-consuming purpose. We see it as the ultimate fulfillment. For every child's cough you can soothe with honey and thyme, for every fever you can break with willow bark tea, there are 100 ramparts of pestilence and decay you cannot storm. The woman with the hard knot in her belly, the farmer who coughs up blood, the newborn who will not pinken, these are not challenges. They are sentences handed down by a power far greater than your own. Your role is not to cheat death, but to bargain with it for a few more moments of peace, to manage pain, to offer a final, steadying human presence. You watch your grandchildren playing in the dust, their laughter a sound that is both strange and familiar. They are strong, healthy, 2 of them, at least. You have buried 3 others. The grief never leaves. It simply becomes a part of you, like a bone that has set crookedly. You have outlived your husband, John, the boy with the stooped shoulders. You have outlived most of your friends. You are an island of memory in a sea of new faces. Your thoughts turn more and more to the end, not with terror, but with a kind of weary pragmatism. It falls on the woman who lives alone at the edge of the village, the one who knows too much about herbs. It falls on the family with the unlucky name. It falls on the Jewish community in the nearby town, who are accused of poisoning the wells. The logic is simple and brutal. If they are the cause, then removing them will solve the problem. Fear, in its purest form, does not seek understanding. It seeks an object to destroy. You see this happening in your own village. In the damp chill of the church, there is a small, splintered piece of wood set behind an iron grill. It is no bigger than your thumb, dark with age. The priest claims it is a sliver from the boat of St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. Once a year, on the saint's feast day, the grill is opened, and for the price of a small coin or a portion of your harvest, you can kiss it. This is a relic, and to you, it is not a symbol. Now, in the deep gut of winter, the consequences are felt in the hollow ache of your belly. The village is quiet, not peaceful, but tense. The laughter of summer is a distant memory. Now there are only the sounds of coughing, the cry of a hungry infant, and the scrape of a wooden spoon against the bottom of an empty pot. This is the hunger moon, the season of making impossible choices. You watch your husband, his face gaunt in the firelight, mending a leather strap with hands that tremble slightly. He does not speak of the hunger. The poultice is finally bound to the boy's infected leg. His mother, her face a mask of exhaustion carved by sleepless nights, doesn't offer you a single word of thanks. Words are air. They fill no bellies and mend no roofs. Instead, she pushes a small, rough-spun sack into your hands. You know its contents without looking. The weight, the granular shift, the precious, sharp scent rising from the burlap. Salt, more valuable than a day's labor, harder to come by than a priest's blessing. You planted it as a sapling on the day your first son was born. The lullaby that your granddaughter now hums to her own child? It is the same one your mother hummed to you, a thread of music stretching back through the silent centuries. This is the quiet legacy. It is not a legacy of power or fame, but of continuation. It is the legacy of survival, of passing on not just genes, but knowledge, skills, and stories. They found a different version of their world and a different version of themselves. And when they returned, if they returned, they brought those stories back with them. Seeds of a wider world planted in the soil of their small village. Section 12. The Stranger at the Gate. A man arrives at dusk. He is not from your village. You can tell by his clothes, by the dialect he speaks, by the way he holds himself, a mixture of weariness and wary pride. He is a stranger, an outsider. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. This is the reality that underpins every prayer and every fairy tale. The story of Hansel and Gretel is not a fantasy. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when the larder is empty. Every decision is filtered through the lens of calories. Do you mend the fence, or does that burn too much energy? Do you share a portion of your grain with a sick neighbor, or is their fate already sealed by God? Here, in the hunger winter, morality becomes a luxury. The line between what is right and what is necessary blurs into a cold, desperate gray. This is the unspoken tension between you, a theological Cold War, fought in the space between a feverish brow and a healing poultice. The Church offers salvation for the soul. You offer relief for the body. To the priest, this is a dangerous distraction, a false comfort that turns a sinner's eyes away from God and back toward the fleeting pains of the earth. Sickness is a spiritual matter, and your herbal remedies are a folk heresy. City is sacred, smelling of the pagan soil and not of sacred incense. This heat is not the warmth of life, but the fire of its opposite. It is the heat of decay, the same that spoils the harvest and sours the milk. You dip a rag in the steaming pot, a simple act of purification that you perform by instinct, not by theory. The rising steam is a cleansing spirit. You wash your own hands, scrubbing them raw until they feel scoured. Then you unstopper the flask of wine. It is harsh, cheap, and potent enough to make a man's head spin. Each time you ground a root or steeped a tea, you were casting a vote for life. You offered a poultice, a tonic, a whispered word of comfort, not because you were sure it would work, but because the act of trying was itself an act of defiance against the suffocating dark. It was a candle lit against an endless winter. It was a promise, however small, that this hour of pain was not the final hour. Have we truly evolved so much from that cold stone floor? A woman growing older, with her own private fears of the coming winter cold, of the gnawing loneliness that lives in the space between being needed and being wanted. This is the unseen tithe of your calling. You are the heart of the community's survival, but you are never truly a part of its body. You are summoned to share in their deepest traumas, the stillbirth, the broken bone, the shaking fever, but you are conspicuously absent from their simple joys. You hear the music from the wedding dances, but you are not invited. You know the fever that will follow, a fire that will burn the poppy-induced haze from his eyes and leave him shivering and delirious. And you know, most of all, the smell, the sweet, sick perfume of dying flesh, a scent that will cling to the blankets, to the very walls of his hut, a final testament to your failure. To be a healer in this world is to live in a constant state of humility. The sun is low, casting long shadows across the fields you have worked your entire life. Your hands, which once held a baby girl named Elara, are now mapped with the geography of a long life. Scars from a scythe, burns from the hearth, the permanent grit of the soil etched into every line. Your back is a constant dull ache. You are old. In a world where reaching 40 is a significant achievement, you are a survivor, a living relic. You sit on a bench outside your small house, the same house you were born in. The priest preaches sermons of fire and brimstone, blaming the sins of mankind, vanity, greed, lust. Processions of flagellants appear on the roads, whipping themselves in a public display of penance. Their chants, a harrowing soundtrack to the growing dread. Their pain is a desperate attempt to appease an angry God. But God is too big, too abstract an enemy. The fear needs a face, it needs a target, and so the search for a scapegoat begins. Suspicion falls on outsiders first. Foreigners, pilgrims, tinkers. Then it turns inward. This relationship with the wild reveals a deep truth about the medieval mind. The world was not empty. Every shadow, every rustle, every strange sound was filled with meaning and intent. The universe was intensely, personally alive. We see an ecosystem. They saw a battleground between saints and demons, order and chaos. Ask yourself, in a world so saturated with belief, where every corner of the natural world is inhabited by spirits, does life become more terrifying or more meaningful? Is a haunted world better than an empty one? You are not just teaching her a name. You are weaving a spell of protection, hoping the sound of it will become a shield she can carry when you are gone. and the existential question settles in the quiet room. Is a life without choice a prison, or is it a kind of freedom? The freedom from the weight of becoming, because you already are. The harvest was poor. The rains came late, then not at all. The wheat grew thin and pale, like a sickly child. And now, ask yourself, as you feel the weight of their stares, in a world that demands a reason for every grave, is it a greater curse to know nothing, or to know just enough to be blamed for everything? By the standards of history, with its focus on battles and dynasties, your entire existence was a footnote, a statistical rounding error in the great census of the dead. But is that the only way to measure a life? Look closer. The stone wall at the edge of the field, the one that still stands against the wind, you helped your husband lay those stones, your hands bleeding, to claim a small piece of the world for your family. The apple tree in the yard, gnarled, but still bearing fruit. For many, pilgrimage was the only vacation they would ever know. It was a sanctioned escape from the crushing monotony of daily life, a chance to see the world beyond their parish. It was a spiritual quest, yes, but it was also an adventure. It was a way to leave the person you were behind, even if just for a season. Did they find God at the shrines? Did touching the dusty bone of a long-dead saint truly cleanse their soul? Perhaps, but what they certainly found was the road itself. The priest recites the Latin, a language you don't understand, but you know the meaning of the vow. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. It is not a romantic promise. It is an ironclad economic and social sentence. Divorce is an impossibility, an abstract concept for kings and queens. For you, this is your life, forever. Your duty is clear, to be an obedient wife, to manage his household, and most importantly, to produce sons, heirs, more hands for the fields, more bodies to carry on his name and protect his land. The last of the dried beans sits in a dusty sack, and the barrel of hard cider is perilously low. It is not yet February. The hunger is not a dramatic event. It is a season. It is a slow, grinding siege that wears down your body and your soul. Your youngest child's cough is a constant, hollow percussion in the one-room hut. You boil scraps of leather to make a thin, gelatinous broth, a trick your grandmother taught you. It fills the belly, but it does not fool it. It is a test of faith, a punishment for sins known and unknown, a purifying fire for the soul. The croup that rattles in this boy's chest is, in his telling, a conversation between the child and his creator. Your work, your very purpose, is to interrupt that conversation. Every time you ease a pain or mend a wound, you are subtly challenging his narrative. You are not offering a prayer for the afterlife. You are offering an alternative to passive acceptance in this one. You are offering agency. You call for wine and boiling water. The room is cramped, the air thick with sweat and the groans of the young woman on the straw bed. Elspeth's face is a pale mask, her eyes wide with the terror of a body betraying her. A simple fall in the yard, a leg gashed open by a rusted bit of iron, and now the fever has come. The wound weeps a thin, foul-smelling liquid, and the flesh around it is an angry, swollen red, hot to the touch. You are a practitioner of the oldest human art, the stubborn, bone-deep refusal to surrender to chaos. You stood in the unlit doorway between the known and the unknown, between the last breath and the first prayer. You were armed with nothing but a handful of leaves, a well-worn mortar and pestle, and a deep, intuitive understanding of fear. It was a language you spoke fluently, a chill you understood in your marrow. You fought death and despair, not with certainty, but with possibility. In this quiet, a quiet so rare it feels sacred, the weight of the village finally lifts from your shoulders. It is a physical sensation, like setting down a pail of water you've carried for miles. For a few precious hours, you are not the healer. You are not the cunning woman, the midwife, the repository of secrets men confess about their wives, and wives confess about their husbands. You are just you. The men hold him down as you pull, the sickening grind and scrape of it, a sound that will live in your ears for weeks. You bind the leg, tight and straight, the white linen a stark contrast to the angry, weeping flesh. You have done everything you know how to do. You have performed the role of healer, but you have seen this before. You know the dark rot that will begin in the deep muscle, a creeping shadow no poultice can touch. This is the terrible power of orthodoxy. It doesn't just punish dissent, it prevents it from ever being spoken, forcing it inward until it festers or dies. The heretic's fire is not just for the person who speaks out. It is a warning to everyone else to remain silent. The melancholy irony is that in its quest for spiritual purity, the Church often fostered a culture of hypocrisy and fear. Was it faith that held this society together, or was it the shared, unspoken terror of the consequences of disbelief? But then, a few weeks later, a peddler who passed through your village is found dead on the road to the next town, his skin covered in dark, weeping sores. The whisper becomes a murmur. The fear is no longer distant. It is at your doorstep. The plague, the great pestilence. They don't call it that yet. They call it the judgment or the scourge, and they need a reason. In a world saturated with divine meaning, a catastrophe of this scale cannot be random. It must be a punishment from God. But for what? To be caught in the woods after dark is to invite disaster. This fear shapes your entire perception of the world. The village is order, safety, God's light. The forest is chaos, danger, pagan darkness. This boundary is not just physical, it is psychological. It is the line between the known and the unknowable. Yet the irony is that your survival depends on crossing that line every single day. You must brave the place you fear most to gather the materials you need to live. It is a constant, low-level negotiation with terror. The superstition is the seed. The community is the soil that makes it grow. This is the quiet tyranny of reputation in a world you can never leave. Your daughter Ilara has no such burden yet. Her name is a clean slate, a small act of defiance against the priest's approved list. It is your hope for her, a secret wish that she might be protected by something older and wilder than the church walls. As you rock her, you murmur it like an incantation. Ilara, Ilara. The immense, shapeless grief of a family, of a village, needs a direction. It needs a name and a face. And as you stand there, alone in your knowledge and your failure, you become the lightning rod for it all. The whispers will start before the boy is even in the ground. Was the whorehound tainted? Was the prayer said backwards? Was there a curse woven into the poultice? The certainty that your knowledge is a tiny, flickering candle pitted against a world of infinite, screaming darkness. This is the true, unspoken burden of your life. Or will you simply fade? another forgotten root in the great tangled tree of generations. Section 16. A Quiet Legacy. The end comes not on a battlefield, nor in a king's court, but in the quiet of a smoky hut, surrounded by the faces of your children and grandchildren. Your life will not be recorded in any chronicle. Your name will not be carved on any stone. In a generation or two, even your descendants will struggle to remember your face or the sound of your voice. The Pilgrim's Road is one of the few places where the rigid structures of medieval life dissolve. Here, a lord and a peasant might share a loaf of bread. A nun and a pardoner might tell stories around the same fire. It is a temporary, mobile community of souls, united by a common destination and a shared hardship. The road is a great leveler. Hunger, thirst, and exhaustion do not respect social status. But this freedom is laced with constant danger. You are vulnerable to bandits, to sickness, to the simple cruelty of strangers. He is twice your age, his beard streaked with gray, his hands calloused from work you do not understand. This is your wedding day. There is no white dress, no flowers, no romance. Your father stands beside you, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. This union is a good one. It joins your family's 3 pigs to your husband's strip of land near the river. It is a contract, an alliance, a merging of assets. Love is not part of the negotiation, but sometimes, in the deepest part of the winter, it sounds only like a hammer, forging the next link in a chain you were born to wear. Correspondence. You stand in the larder, the cold seeping up from the packed earth floor. The air is thick with the scent of salt, smoke, and a faint, sweet smell of decay you try to ignore. There are 2 strips of salted pork left, hanging stiff and gray from the rafters. Then a shadow cuts across the single sliver of sunlight from the doorway. It's him, Father Michael. He stands on the threshold, a stark figure in black wool, his presence sucking the warmth from the room. He doesn't step inside. He never does. He simply watches, his face a mask of weary piety. He nods, a gesture both curt and heavy with meaning. It is not a greeting, it is an accounting. In his church, a place of cold stone and soaring echoes, he preaches that suffering is God's will. It is a language the priest, with all his celestial authority, could never understand. In an age where power is written and passed down from on high, your authority grows up from the soil itself. It is intimate, practical, and dangerously unofficial. When you save a life with a weed he calls demonic, you perform a miracle he cannot explain. And every life you save is another stone in the foundation of your silent, precarious throne. Ask yourself, when knowledge is a threat to the established order, does healing become an act of rebellion? So what were you, in the end? A proto-scientist fumbling toward empirical truth in a world of superstition? Your hands, stained with the juice of poppy and nightshade, holding a fragile key to a door you couldn't yet see? Or were you a purveyor of comforting lies, your power resting solely on the faith of the desperate? A weaver of tales told to the dying, a merchant of placebos in a world that had no other currency? The answer, etched in the lines of your face by 100 sleepless nights, is both and neither. Your back is a roadmap of aches, a dull fire of its own, from bending over sweaty beds and crawling through the damp woods for roots and leaves. You look at your hands in the flickering light. They are stained with the deep purple of gentian, the stubborn brown of dried blood, and the faint green of crushed yarrow. They are not the hands of a wife or a mother. They are the hands of a tool, one the village uses to ward off God's darker moods. These are the rituals. These are the sacraments of your craft. As you work, the world narrows to this single, terrible task. You wash the wound, your fingers gentle, picking out the splinters of wood and fragments of earth. Every touch sends a fresh wave of agony through Thomas, his screams turning to choked, guttural sobs. The poppy milk arrives, a cloudy, bitter-smelling liquid. You lift his head, coaxing the draught between his clenched teeth. It is a mercy, but a small one, a brief armistice in a war you have already lost. You try to set the bone. You have wondered why God would allow so many children to die. You have felt a flicker of resentment at the wealth of the church while your own family starves. But now, these thoughts are not just thoughts. They are dangerous crimes. To express them would be to risk everything: your reputation, your safety, your very life. And so you learn to perform piety. You lower your eyes in church. You cross yourself more often. You keep your thoughts locked away in the deepest, most secret part of your mind. It is a form of internal exile. Was this annual explosion of life a vital release that made the isolation bearable, or was it a cruel reminder of a world they could see and touch but never truly join? It begins as a whisper, a story brought by a traveler on market day, a tale of a sickness in a port city far to the south, a sickness that moves faster than a man on horseback, that leaves no survivors. The story is unsettling but distant. It's a problem for other people, in other places. Trolls, goblins, and the woad-woes, the wild men of the wood who might steal children or lead travelers astray. You believe that the strange lights seen flickering in the marsh, what we would call swamp gas, are the corpse candles of will-o'-the-wisps, malevolent spirits trying to lure you to a watery grave. The sound of a snapping twig is not just an animal. It could be an outlaw, a leper, or something far worse. The fear is so real, it is almost a physical presence. You never enter the forest alone, and never after Vespers. A child born on a Tuesday, Daislun, the day of the moon, is considered unlucky, prone to melancholy or madness. A child with a red birthmark is touched by the devil's envy. A name can be a blessing or a curse, a self-fulfilling prophecy. You watch a boy named Alaric, a strong, noble name, grow tall and confident, praised for his bearing. You watch another named Ugo, a name associated with a local fool from a generation past, and you see how the villagers' low expectations shape him, how he stoops, how he avoids eye contact. It's a terrible question, ancient and sharp as a shard of flint. Did your remedy fail, or was it never a remedy at all? This is the moment the spell breaks. This is when all your good work evaporates like dew in the sun. Every birth you've eased, every fever you've broken, every wound you've cleaned, those were God's miracles, and you were merely His vessel. The village celebrated His grace, His saints, His divine mercy. Your successes were expected, absorbed into the rhythm of faith. But failure is a secular thing. It is heavy, and it is yours alone. You sit by the fire, your work finally done, and watch the life of the village continue without you. It is a harvest of years, a strange and melancholy peace. You have planted your seeds, raised your crop of children and grandchildren, and now you can only watch and wait. You are a bridge to the past, but the world is relentlessly moving forward toward a future you will not see. The question is not what you will do with your remaining time, but what will they remember of you? Will it be your wisdom, your stories? The knight beside you, his armor now rusted and dented, walks to Canterbury to do penance for the men he killed in a border skirmish. The woman with the haunted eyes walks to Walsingham, praying for a child after 5 barren years of marriage. The merchant with the fat purse walks to Rome, a journey of thanksgiving for a prosperous year, his piety a form of insurance for the next. And you? Perhaps you walk for all these reasons, or perhaps you walk simply to escape. She is the engine of the household, the linchpin of survival. Yet in the eyes of the world, of the church, of the law, she is little more than property herself. Her value is tied to her father or her husband. Her labor is theirs. Her body is theirs. But her exhaustion, that at least is entirely her own. Section 7. The Unforgiving Vow. You are 14 years old. You stand before the church door, your hand clammy in the grip of a man you have met twice. This constant, audible presence of the divine is both a comfort and a form of surveillance. It reminds you that you are part of a flock, guided and protected. But it also reminds you that you are always being watched, always being measured, your every action bracketed by the call to prayer. Ask yourself, is this a comfort or a prison? To have every moment of your life structured for you, your path laid out by a sound you cannot ignore. You are never lost, but you are never free. The bell is the voice of God, they say. The air in the small hut is thick with the competing smells of life and decay. Under your fingers, the boy's skin is a parchment of fever, stretched tight over his bones. You change the damp cloth on his forehead, its coolness a fleeting truce in a war being fought within his blood. The poultice on his chest, a dark green mash of yarrow and crushed willow, rises and falls with each ragged breath. It is a humble, earthy magic, learned from your mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of knowledge passed down like a worn wooden rosary. It is an encyclopedia of textures, scents, and seasons, passed from your mother to you in whispers while foraging in the woods, just as her mother passed it to her. She taught you which mushrooms would kill a man before the sun set, and which would grant him visions of the saints. She showed you how the phase of the moon could sweeten or sour a tincture. This inherited wisdom is a form of wealth the lord of the manor, with all his land and coin, could never possess. We are the answer to the questions they were condemned for asking. Music swells slightly and then fades to silence. The door is barred, not with iron, but with silence. For the first time since the sun betrayed the horizon, no one is dying. No one is birthing. No one is knocking with that frantic, desperate rhythm you know better than a prayer. You sit on a low stool by your own small fire, the one you feed with wood you gathered yourself, and let the flames hypnotize the day's ghosts into submission. Your gut, however, has gone cold, a knot of ice forming where your breakfast sat. You look at the wound, at the dirt and pine needles ground into the flesh, and you know the limits of your power. This is not a simple break. It is an open door, and you know what demons will come crawling through it. You send a boy running for poppy milk, your voice steady, a rock in the torrent of their fear. You call for hot water, clean linen, and the splints you carved yourself from ash wood, smoothed and seasoned through a long winter. But she's always been an outsider, a woman who walks the line between the Christian world and an older, wilder one. The friar's sermon gives a name to the village's latent suspicion of her. Her knowledge is now seen not as a gift, but as a dark art. People who once sought her help now cross the street to avoid her. They whisper that her poultices are made with unholy ingredients, that the prayers she mutters over a newborn are incantations to the devil. The fear is suffocating. You have your own doubts, your own quiet questions. You see new faces, hear new ideas, and are reminded that you are part of a larger, more complex world. It's a glimpse of the possibilities that lie beyond your daily reality, a reality to which you must return when the sun sets and the merchants pack their carts. The melancholy truth is that this brief, vibrant escape only serves to emphasize the quiet monotony of the other 364 days of the year. To you, the woods are a place of profound duality. They are a source of survival. You go there for firewood, the lifeblood of your home. You forage for mushrooms, nuts, and berries to supplement a meager diet. Your husband might risk setting a snare for a rabbit, a crime punishable by mutilation or death if the Lord's gamekeeper finds it. The forest is a larder, a woodpile, a pharmacy of herbs and roots. It is essential, but it is also a place of terror. You were raised on stories of what lives in the deep woods. The Cooper's boy, Cooper. Their destiny is forged at the font, their life's work a foregone conclusion. There is a brutal simplicity to it, a lack of choice that we would call suffocating, but which they might have called clarity. To know your place is to be secure in it. There is no anxiety of ambition, no paralysis of infinite possibility. There is only the path, worn smooth by the feet of your ancestors. You are a link in a chain, and your purpose is to not be the one that breaks. But there is a darker side to this. His lungs filled with water, as surely as a pail dipped in the river. His breath grew ragged, and then he was gone. Yesterday, when you arrived, the mother clutched your hand as if you were an angel. You were the wise woman, the one who understood the secret language of the earth. Today, as the father stumbles out of the hovel, his face a mask of hollowed-out grief, he looks not at you, but through you. In his eyes, red-rimmed and empty, a question is taking shape. Your world is already becoming a memory to them. They cannot truly understand the depth of the hunger you knew, the starkness of the fears you faced. In a world with no retirement, no state support, your survival depends entirely on the goodwill of your family and community. You are reliant on the very children you raised, hoping you have earned enough love or fear to be fed and housed in your final years. To become a burden is the great terror of old age. FIEV. Section 11, The Pilgrim's Road. You have been walking for 2 months. The shoes you started with are long gone, replaced by rags wrapped around your bleeding feet. You have seen more of the world than anyone in your village ever will. Forests so dark they feel like night, rivers wider than you could have imagined, and towns so large they buzz with the sound of 1,000 lives. You are a pilgrim. Why are you here? The reasons are as varied as the travelers you meet on the road. Yet this constant, life-sustaining effort is not considered work. It has no economic value. It is simply a woman's duty, as natural and unremarked upon as breathing. She watches her husband and sons go out to the fields, their work a clear, defined task with a beginning and an end. Her work has no end. It is a circle. As soon as one meal is finished, the preparation for the next begins. As soon as one garment is mended, another is torn. There is an irony in this, a quiet, sorrowful paradox. He rings the bell for a wedding, a birth, a baptism. He rings it to warn of a raid or a fire, and he rings the slow, soul-draining toll for the dead, a sound that makes every mother clutch her child a little tighter. The tolling is a public ledger of life and death. The community doesn't read of its triumphs and sorrows. It hears them, amplified in bronze. There is no privacy in this life, only shared experience, mediated by the rope in the bell tower. Your joy is the village's joy. Your grief is the village's warning. This externalized sense of self is a ghost to our modern cult of individualism. But it was the fundamental, unshakable reality of their world. You were what you were to others, nothing more and certainly nothing less. Ask yourself, if your very soul was a story told by others, would you fight to write your own chapter? Or would you simply pray they told a kind one? And there is the rusty red of powdered yarrow, the soldier's woundwort, ready to be snuffed up a nostril to stop a sudden, terrifying nosebleed. These are not tools of science as a future age would know it. They are tools of survival, an arsenal of quiet miracles honed by 1,000 years of trial, error, and hushed observation. This is the core of your power, a knowledge that lives not in the priest's Latin books, which you cannot read, but in your hands, your nose, your memory. The woman in her herb garden is the ancestor of the scientist in the lab, the doctor fighting a pandemic, the thinker pushing against the boundaries of accepted truth. Her struggle is our struggle, amplified by a world without the buffers of science and law we now take for granted. Her story is a ghost that still walks the corridors of our own age, reminding us how thin the veil of civilization truly is. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now inhabit. We are reminded that the human heart has changed far less than the skyline, and that the struggle to make sense of a beautiful and terrifying world is the most enduring story of all. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted in faith, every prayer they whispered in fear, every child they raised against the odds helped build the world we now inhabit. Their cathedrals were their children, their prayers were the harvest, and their legacy is the quiet, stubborn rhythm of human survival, beating on even now in all of us. But the man on the plank is not Thomas anymore. He is a vessel for a sound, a single piercing scream that seems to pull the air from your lungs. His leg is bent at an angle that God never intended, a sharp, horrific V below the knee, and from the torn cloth and mangled flesh, the bone juts out, stark and white and glistening, a shard of winter in a sea of blood. You do not flinch. You move with the slow, deliberate calm that people mistake for wisdom. After the plague, after the hunger, people are desperate for certainty, for a clear line between good and evil, saved and damned. The friar provides this. He offers a simple, terrifying clarity. You are with us, or you are with them. The community, once bound by shared experience, now begins to police itself. A sideways glance, a muttered complaint, a failure to attend church, all are now seen as potential signs of heresy. You see it happen to old Agnes, the midwife. She has delivered half the village, her knowledge of childbirth and herbs passed down through generations of women. A group of drunken squires from the Lord's household swagger through the market, shoving people aside, their laughter laced with menace. For a woman alone, the market is a place of potential danger, a gauntlet of unwanted attention and crude remarks. Safety lies in staying close to your neighbors, in being part of a familiar group. The market highlights the profound isolation of normal medieval life. This sudden, overwhelming social contact is a shock to the system. For a few hours, your world expands beyond the borders of your own village. A world that defined and limited them, but also gave them a domain where they were undisputed masters, their knowledge essential, their labor the true bedrock of civilization. The village ends abruptly. One moment, you are on the muddy track between familiar huts. The next, you are facing the forest. It is not a park. It is not a place for recreation. It is a wall of shadow, a different kingdom with its own laws and its own older gods. The church may own your soul. The Lord may own your labor, but the forest belongs to itself. But a name is more than a sound. It is an anchor, a piece of invisible armor. In a world where your entire life is circumscribed by the village you were born in, your name is your first and last piece of identity. It is what the Lord's reeve will write in his ledger next to the tally of grain you owe. It is what your husband will call out in the dark. It is what the village will murmur when you are carried to the churchyard. You see how names function here. The baker's son is called Baker. You remember crushing the mullein leaves, their fuzzy texture a promise of relief for the lungs. You recall the sticky, dark horehound syrup you'd simmered over your own fire, whispering a prayer to Saint Blaise, patron of throats, as the sweet medicinal steam filled your small cottage. You did everything you knew. You brought your poultices, your teas, your entire painstakingly gathered legacy of herbal lore. But the fever was a forge, and his little body was just kindling. You are the one who remembers the great famine of '49, who can trace the lineage of every family back 3 generations, who knows the old remedies the young mothers have forgotten. You are the one who knows which fields are fertile and which are cursed, who remembers where the boundaries of the parish truly lie, not where the Lord's new map says they are. This role gives you a measure of respect. The young come to you for stories, for advice, for judgment in disputes. They listen, but there is a distance in their eyes. It is a stark reminder that in this era, belief is more powerful than fact. The verdict is not about what happened to the pig. It is a public referendum on your standing with God. And in a community this small, God's judgment and your neighbor's judgment are one and the same. The fear of the ordeal was often enough to produce a confession, whether true or not. Better to admit to stealing a pig than to risk your hand, your life, and your eternal soul on the judgment of hot iron. It is the spinning of wool, the weaving of cloth, the salting of meat, the making of cheese. It is the bearing of children and the far more frequent burying of them. This labor is the thread that holds the entire social fabric together. Without it, the celebrated work of men would be impossible. A knight cannot ride to battle if his clothes are not stitched, his food not preserved. A farmer cannot work the fields if his children are not fed, and his home is not kept from falling into ruin. It tells you when to pray, when to begin work in the fields, when to break for a meager meal, and when the curfew bell, the ignicendium, commands you to cover your fire and surrender the day to the darkness. Time is not a river you float upon. It is a cage, and the bells are its bars. You don't own your hours. They are owned by the sun, by the seasons, and above all, by the church. The priest, from his stone tower, orchestrates the rhythm of every soul in the village. It is the trust in the woman's eyes, the suspicion in the blacksmith's stare after his prize sow died, the hope in the face of a new mother with a sick infant. Reputation is survival, as real and as vital as bread and water. It determines whether you receive an extra share of the slaughter at Martinmas, a warm place by a neighbor's fire on a bitter night, or the cold shoulder of suspicion that can curdle into something far more dangerous. You run a thumb along its cool, flat side, a reminder that the world is wider and stranger than your village. Your remedies are the colors of the earth itself, an artist's palette for mending flesh. There is the chalky white of ground eggshells mixed with pig fat, a soothing balm for the angry red rash that blossoms on a baby's skin. There is the deep, bruised green of a comfrey poultice, still fragrant with the fields, waiting to be warmed and wrapped around the woodcutter's broken bone, a silent promise to knit it back together. By sitting with their terror, we understand the immense, terrifying power of collective belief to reshape reality, to turn a healer into a monster, a neighbor into a demon. We gain a humility about our own reason and a deep appreciation for the courage it took to seek knowledge in a world that so often punished it. And what remains of them in us? More than we think. The impulse to find patterns in the static, the whisper of suspicion against those who are different, the comfort of a shared enemy in a time of crisis. Their blended faith was not a weakness, but a sophisticated psychological shelter built from whatever materials lay at hand. When we honestly study these ordinary, vanished people, we gain more than facts about farming yields or parish records. We gain a profound sense of perspective. We look past the gold and the gore of popular history, and we find us. We see our own anxieties, our own blend of the rational and the irrational, our own desperate search for comfort and meaning, reflected in a distant, smoky mirror. The shouting shatters the afternoon quiet long before you see them. It's a sound of panic, not anger. A raw, frantic barking that sends birds scattering from the thatch of your roof. Then they are at your door, two men, their faces slick with sweat, their knuckles white as they grip the rough-hewn plank between them. On the plank is a third man, a woodcutter. You know him. His name is Thomas, and he has a wife who sings while she churns butter, and a son who just lost his first tooth. He speaks of the devil, of the fires of hell, and of the heretics who walk among you, pretending to be devout. He tells you that the woman who uses folk charms to heal a sick cow is practicing witchcraft. He says the man who doubts the holiness of a relic is spitting in the face of God. He says that doubt itself is a doorway through which demons enter the soul. His words find fertile ground in the soil of your fear. This is how information moves, not through print, but through breath, passed from one person to another like a virus. You see a juggler, his clothes a patchwork of bright rags, drawing a crowd of laughing children. A pilgrim, his hat adorned with the lead badges of a dozen shrines, tells a rapt audience about a miracle he witnessed. But there is a dark side to this festive chaos. A cutpurse moves silently through the crowd, his eyes scanning for a dangling pouch. It is where you learn which herbs will soothe a cough, which poultices will draw out an infection, and which prayers are best for a colicky baby. Men may hold the power in the fields and in the church, but women hold the power of life and death in the home. The midwife knows more about the female body than any university-trained physician. The alewife controls a vital part of the local economy. It's a subtle, unspoken influence, but it is real. Was this separation of spheres a cage or a fortress? And as you finally reach out, your calloused hand covering the tiny, fragile curve of her back, you ask yourself, in a world where love is a risk, how much of your heart do you dare to give to something that can be so easily taken away? Her name is Ilara, a name whispered by your own grandmother, said to belong to a forgotten saint of the hedgerows, a protector of lost things. It is not a name from the priest's book, and for that he scowled. The sound that rips through the damp morning air is not human. It is the sound of a world ending, the howl of a she-wolf whose pup has been stolen from the den. You stand at the edge of the wattle and daub hovel, the cold mud seeping into the worn leather of your shoes. This is where your knowledge ends and the screaming begins. The little boy with the hacking cough is dead. You see his small, still form on the straw pallet inside. A stark silence where a desperate rattle had been only hours before. To reach old age in this world is not a victory. It is a strange, lonely miracle. You are now an elder, a position that comes with a new, ambiguous kind of status. You are no longer strong enough for the fields. Your value is no longer in your labor. Your new value lies in your memory. You are a living chronicle, a repository of the village's unwritten history. If by some miracle your wounds are clean and healing, you are innocent. God has performed a miracle to prove it. Thomas will have to pay a fine for his false accusation. There is a terrible, awesome certainty to it. It outsources the impossible task of knowing a man's heart to the divine. But it is also a system ripe for manipulation. Did the priest heat the iron quite as hot for a wealthy man? Was the healing salve applied to the wounds of a friend more potent? A man's work is hard, it is true. He plows the field, he fells the trees, he goes to war. His labor is visible. It's measured in acres and bushels, and it is recorded by the reeve. But a woman's work is like water. It is everywhere, it is essential, and it is completely invisible. It's the mending of clothes by candlelight until your eyes burn. It's the brewing of weak ale because the water isn't safe to drink. It's the tending of the kitchen garden, the source of the herbs that keeps scurvy at bay. It's an iron command, rolling across the thatched roofs and fallow fields, pulling you from the shared warmth of the straw mattress. Before your eyes are fully open, the sound has already laid out your day. It is the clock of God, and its hands are wrapped around your life. You rise not because you are rested, but because the bell has rung. It is time for lauds, the first prayer, and the first chore. This sound is the spine of your world. At worst, she is malevolent, a vessel for the devil's spite. Her remedies a dark mockery of God's will. The line between the two is as thin as a spider's thread, and you do not get to decide which side you stand on. In an age with few true mirrors, your reflection is not found in polished silver or still water. It is found in the faces of your community. It is far softer and more absorbent than the rough, precious linen the Lady of the Manor uses for her veils, a perfect cushion for packing a deep wound to staunch the bleeding. Beside it lies a shard of polished obsidian, a treasure bartered from a traveling peddler who spoke of mountains of glass in a land far to the south. Its edge is sharper than any iron knife the blacksmith can forge, a sliver of night, perfect for lancing a boil before its poison can seep into the blood. It searches for a cause, for an agent, for a story that can contain the terror. It searches for a scapegoat. What we gain when we look honestly at these ordinary, vanished people is a profound and unsettling mirror. We see the DNA of our own modern anxieties. We see that the witch hunt was not born of fantasy, but of the same social mechanics that fuel conspiracy theories today. It is the need for a simple villain to explain a complex problem, the comfort of blaming an outsider for an internal fear. It is woven into the very fabric of our modern world in ways we no longer recognize. The timeless takeaway from their existence is not that they were simple, but that their world was overwhelmingly complex, and they met that complexity with a fierce spiritual pragmatism. Their minds were not empty spaces waiting for enlightenment. They were crowded cathedrals filled with saints and sprites, divine love and demonic terror, all warring and coexisting. They lived in a state of violent certainty about the afterlife and profound mystery about the everyday, the opposite of our modern condition. The deep human need for meaning, for a story that makes sense of suffering and chaos, is the same need that drove them to their knees in prayer or sent them on pilgrimages to touch the bones of a saint. They are the deep, submerged roots of the tree we now inhabit. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now take for granted. As you sit by the fire, listening to the men's low voices determining the entire course of your future, you ask, which is more enduring, a love born of choice and passion, or a love that grows from necessity and duty? Can a contract become a covenant? A friar with eyes like hot coals has come to the village. He speaks not in the droning Latin of the parish priest, but in the common tongue, his voice a lash. He does not speak of God's love and mercy. This is more than just a place to trade your meager surplus of eggs for a bit of salt or an iron nail. This is the internet, the newspaper, and the theater all rolled into one. You stand near the well, pretending to wait your turn, but you are really listening. You hear news of the king's wars, embellished and distorted with each telling. You hear of a two-headed calf born 2 villages over, a surefire omen of doom. You hear gossip about the Lord's daughter and a stable hand. Without it, you would all freeze. Later, at the loom, you will weave these threads into rough, scratchy cloth, your body swaying back and forth, creating fabric from nothingness. The men hunt the sheep. You transform its gift into warmth. There is a surprising power in this world of women. The bakehouse, the well, the riverbank where clothes are washed, these are female spaces. Here, information is exchanged, reputations are made or broken, and knowledge is passed down. Faith isn't an abstract comfort. It's a practical tool, as necessary as an axe. You pray for the child's soul, yes, but you also pray for her lungs to be strong, for your milk to be plentiful, for the winter to be mild. It is a faith of bargains and petitions, a constant negotiation with an unseen world that holds all the power. The placebo effect isn't a modern discovery. It was the very cornerstone of your practice. It is a quiet, unspoken contract between healer and patient, a shared ritual against the chaos. Ask yourself, when a person's reality is woven from faith and fear, is a lie that heals still a lie? Or is it the only truth that matters? This is the quiet, grinding reality of the class divide. It is not just a matter of wealth, but of life itself. A deer's life is worth more than a peasant's, because the deer belongs to the Lord, and the peasant does too. Section 15. The Harvest of Years. Your hands are gnarled now, the joints swollen like knots in an old oak. Your back is permanently bent from a lifetime of labor. You have outlived your husband, most of your friends, and half of your children. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Well, Section 6. The Woman's Work. The day is a litany of labors, a cycle as unchanging as the seasons. You rise before the sun, not to pray, but to feed the fire, the hungry heart of the home. You grind the coarse grain for the day's bread, your shoulders and back already aching with a familiar deep-set pain. You milk the goat, fetch water from the well, two heavy wooden buckets that strain your arms and soak your hem in mud, and begin the endless task of preparing food. There is no rest. Rest is a form of death. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin, and live the life they never got to finish. Section 2. The Sound of the Bells. The first bell of the day, the Angelus, shatters the frozen silence. It's not a gentle awakening. Today, he does not see you. His health is a fact, your role in it already a half-forgotten story. This is the rhythm of your identity. It is not your own. It is a tapestry woven from the whispers of your neighbors, the grateful glances, the averted eyes, the sudden silences when you approach a gossiping huddle. You are the sum of your successes and failures, tallied not in a ledger, but in the communal memory. A good healer is a blessing, a gift from God, carried in knowing hands. A failed healer is at best incompetent. You unroll the leather flap of your satchel, and the scent of the damp earth and dried herbs fills the small space of your hut. There are no gleaming instruments here, no rows of vials filled with carefully measured chemicals. Your power is humbler, quieter, and far older. Inside, you see the tools of a trade that has no name, no guild, and no written laws. There is a bundle of sphagnum moss gathered from the bog during the last dry spell, painstakingly cleaned and fluffed. We leave her there, standing at the precipice, the air thick with a fear she can almost taste. Her story, and countless others like it, is not just a relic of a superstitious past. It is a timeless lesson etched in bone and ash. The deepest takeaway from the medieval world is not about its cruelty or its piety, but about its humanity, and the desperate, often violent ways people have always tried to make sense of chaos. When faced with the incomprehensible, a plague, a famine, a loss that defies reason, the human mind recoils from the idea of randomness. Section 17. Wind down, reflective close. And so the toolkit is passed down, not in books of theology, but in whispers from mother to daughter, in the shared rituals of a harvest, in the silent, common understanding of a village facing another brutal winter. These lives were not recorded by chroniclers. They left no grand tapestries depicting their triumphs. Their history is written in the wear pattern on a stone threshold. Smoothed by 1,000 anxious footsteps, it is found in the faint echo of a folk remedy for coughs, one that still uses honey and thyme. It is to recognize that our own certainties, our science, our technology, our belief in progress, are themselves a product of our time, just as their faith was a product of theirs. We gain an appreciation for the sheer, stubborn resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. What still remains of them in us, more than we think? The echo of their superstitions survives in our knocking on wood or avoiding black cats. The rhythm of their agricultural year still faintly structures our own, with its summer holidays and winter festivities. You see it in the way your father saves the best piece of bread for your mother, in the way she mends his tunic without being asked. It is not the fiery passion of the songs, but a slow, quiet accretion of shared hardship, a companionship forged in the crucible of a difficult life. Perhaps this is the only kind of love that can truly last in a world like this. Not a love that is found, but one that is built, piece by painstaking piece, over a lifetime of winters and harvests. From before dawn, the tracks leading to the village have been crowded with people you see only a few times a year. Charcoal burners from the forest, shepherds from the high hills, tinkers, peddlers, and farmers from the next valley over. The air, usually thick with the smell of wood smoke and manure, is now a riot of new scents. Spices from a peddler's pouch, fresh baked bread from a traveling oven, the sharp tang of cheap wine, and the overwhelming perfume of unwashed humanity pressed close together. Brewing is your domain, a form of kitchen alchemy, turning grain and water into something that provides calories and a moment's respite from the world. A bad batch of ale is not just a disappointment, it is a domestic disaster. Then comes the thread. You sit at the door of your small hut, the drop spindle a constant companion. Your fingers, deft and sure, spin wool into yarn. Twist, draft, release. Twist, draft, release. It is a meditative, endless rhythm, the backdrop to gossip, to watching children, to singing old songs. This thread will become clothing, blankets, bandages. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and human sleep. This is the scent of existence. You shift your weight on the straw mattress, the rustle loud in the stillness. The baby stirs, a small whimper escaping her lips. You feel a pang, not of affection, but of a deeper, more primal bond. She is your blood, your legacy. Her survival is a continuation of your own fight against the dark. This is the first lesson of medieval life. Nothing is guaranteed. Not the sun, not the harvest, not the next breath. He groans, not just from the pressure on his joints, but with the relief of believing the eviction has begun. Your medicine must always work on two levels, the physical and the metaphysical. The medieval mind does not separate them. Sickness is not just a biological malfunction. It is a cosmic imbalance, a tear in the fabric between the sacred and the profane. To be an effective healer, you must be a master of both herbal remedies and human psychology. You treat the disease, but you also placate the demons, both real and imagined. It is a piece of theater designed to remind every tenant of the consequences of disobedience. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. The young man is found guilty. The punishment for poaching a deer is hanging. There is no appeal. You watch as he is led to the gallows tree at the edge of the village, a permanent reminder of the Lord's power. There is a deep, simmering resentment in the crowd, a sense of injustice so profound it has no voice. But it is silent. To speak out would be to join him on the gallows. In a world of your word against his, how is the truth to be found? It will not be found by men. It will be found by God. The priest declares a trial by ordeal. You are brought to the village green, the entire community watching. Your hands are bound. The priest heats a bar of iron in a brazier until it glows a terrifying, angry red. He blesses the iron, asking God to protect the innocent and expose the guilty. Then, you are forced to carry the glowing bar for 9 paces. They are so deeply enmeshed in their community, so profoundly connected by duty and blood, that they lack any concept of the individual self we cherish. Their triumphs were communal, their sorrows were shared, but their choices were rarely their own. Ask yourself, would you survive without choice, finding safety only by dissolving into the will of the group? Or would you bend just enough to fit the mold, always dreaming of a life that was yours and yours alone? We will walk through their lives, feel the changing of their seasons, and understand how fear shaped their rituals, and how hunger rewrote their morality. This is a journey into the small moments that defined an entire existence. The birth of a child in a cold hut, the prayer whispered over a blighted crop, the shared story that kept a village from despair. It is an attempt to understand the immense, silent weight of a world governed by superstition, faith, and the simple, brutal need to see the next sunrise. Our husband's arm, scalded by a tipping cookpot last week, is no longer weeping. The salve of comfrey and yarrow you prepared is working its quiet magic. That look is your payment. It is your shield. A moment later, a child of about 7, his cheeks still rosy with health, darts out from behind a wattle fence, chasing a stray chicken. He runs past without a glance. Just last month, this was the boy whose fever you broke with a potent willow bark tea, his mother weeping at your feet as the heat finally fled his small body. As you duck into the suffocating warmth of Thomas's hut, the air hits you, thick with the metallic smell of blood, sweat, and a fear so profound it feels like another person in the room. You know that tonight you are not just delivering a child. You are presiding over a trial, the trial of a new life, a mother's soul, and your own precarious existence. It needs a body to bear the weight of its grief and terror. And all eyes, slowly, inevitably, turn to you, the woman who lives on the edge of things, the woman who knows more than she should. Ask yourself, in a world governed by fear, is knowledge a shield or a target? And when your neighbors come for you, convinced you are the cause of their pain, how do you defend yourself against a crime that requires no proof, only accusation? The music shifts again, becoming slower, more melancholic and reflective. In a world where a sudden fever can steal a child overnight, and a bad harvest can mean starvation for a village, who are you to discard any tool that might offer protection? Ask yourself, when the wolves are howling, literal and metaphorical, do you bar the door with only one lock? Or do you use every bolt, every charm, every prayer you know? But in doing so, we miss the point. We risk turning them into one-dimensional figures in a dark and brutal fairy tale, people defined only by what they lacked. The truth is that they were not lesser versions of us. They were us, facing a different set of fears with a different set of tools. Their minds were wired to a world where the supernatural was natural, where time was cyclical, and where the community was both a fortress and a prison. To honestly study these vanished people is to gain a profound sense of humility. It was about forging alliances, consolidating land, and ensuring the continuation of a family line. A good match was not one that made you happy, but one that made your family more secure. A wife was chosen for her strong hips and her reputation for hard work. A husband was chosen for his inheritance and his sturdy back. Romance was a dangerous luxury, a foolishness that could lead to ruin. And yet, you see the quiet, unspoken affection between your own parents. As you watch William being led away, his fate sealed for the next 3 days, you wonder, what does it do to a society when the very concept of truth is subject to divine whim and organized ritual? Does it create a more pious people, or simply a more fearful one? For weeks, life has been a monochrome of mud, toil, and gray skies. But today, the world explodes with color and sound. It is market day. Your work is the sinew, the muscle, the blood that gives it life, and it is never, ever done. The day begins with fire and water. You coax the embers in the hearth back to life, your breath a prayer against the damp. You walk to the well, the wooden yoke digging into your shoulders, 2 heavy buckets sloshing with every step. This water will be used for everything. The thin pottage that simmers all day over the fire, the washing of rags, the brewing of the weak, watery ale that is safer to drink than the water itself. In this world, attachment is a wager against God and nature, and the odds are rarely in your favor. Half the children born in this village will not see their 5th year. They are ghosts waiting to happen, their names whispered in prayer, but rarely spoken aloud in hope. Every shadow in the room feels like a presence. You see the glint of the scythe hanging on the wall. Not a tool of death, but of life, of the harvest that will or will not feed this new mouth. But the source of his pain in his mind is not of this world. You prepare a liniment, a thick, greasy salve of goose fat, oil of wintergreen, and pungent mustard seed. The smell alone is an assault, sharp and overwhelming. As you rub it into his skin, you do not explain how it soothes inflammation. You tell him its powerful scent is an offense to the spirit world, that the imp, which thrives on dampness and decay, will be driven out by the clean, fiery aroma. This is the 2-tiered system of justice. If a nobleman commits a crime, he might be tried by the king's court, or pay a hefty fine, or be sent on a crusade as penance. His life has value. But for the serf, justice is swift, brutal, and designed to reinforce the power structure. The law is not a shield to protect the weak. It is a hammer to keep them in their place. The purpose of this trial is not to determine guilt or innocence. It is to make an example. A man crosses himself when he sees a lone magpie, one for sorrow, not because he is foolish, but because he is afraid. He is trying to build a wall of small magics against the great and terrible uncertainties of his existence. Was it fear that saved them? Or was it the illusion of control that gave them the strength to face another day? Section 10. The Trial by Fire. Your neighbor Thomas accuses you of stealing his pig. You deny it. He denies your denial. There are no witnesses. There is no evidence. You are John's daughter. William's wife, the cousin of the blacksmith. Your identity is a reflection of your male relative status. This belonging is absolute. To be cast out from your kin, to become a person with no connections, is a fate worse than death. It is to be an outlaw in the truest sense of the word, outside the law, outside protection, a ghost walking in a world of solid, interconnected clans. There is a moment of historical melancholy here, watching them. Forget the grand chronicles written by the victors. This is history from the ground up, from the mud and the mire. This is sleepy history, where we listen for the whispers of the forgotten. The farmer, the midwife, the weaver, the serf. We're here to explore the quiet, desperate, and resilient truth of human survival. How did they endure? What did they truly believe when the priest wasn't listening? What secret hopes did they nurture in the dark, when the only light came from a sliver of moon? You walk back through the village, the hem of your tunic dark with mud and morning dew. The air is thick with the competing smells of damp thatch, wood smoke, and the ever-present earthy scent of livestock. To your right, a woman is scrubbing a pot at her doorway. She sees you, pauses, and nods. Her eyes, webbed with the fine lines of a hard life, crinkle in a silent but profound thank you. They will know if you succeeded, and they will whisper your name in reverence, a saint of the soil. Or they will know if you failed, and they will whisper it as a curse, a tainted word. In this world, your skill is a form of magic, a dangerous tightrope walk between miracle and malediction. Was it God that guided your hands, or something older, something darker from the woods? You are both their last hope and their easiest scapegoat. You are one bad harvest, one unexplained illness away from being dragged from your hut. The very things that made you valuable, your knowledge, your skill, your quiet communion with the earth, will become your indictment. Your carefully gathered herbs, dried and bundled in the rafters, will be presented not as medicine, but as the instruments of a witch. The line between healer and witch is not a line at all. It is a shadow, and it moves with the mood of the mob. It follows the path of their fear. The village needs a reason for its suffering. A blacksmith has a hammer for shaping and tongs for holding. A farmer has a scythe for reaping and a flail for threshing. You have the saints for your eternal soul and the old ways for the immediate, terrifying present. You use what works. This ability to hold multiple, seemingly contradictory beliefs at once is not a sign of a primitive mind. It is a fundamental human trait, a form of spiritual pragmatism born from desperation. It persists today in the patient who trusts in the cold steel of a surgeon's scalpel and the warm power of a bedside prayer. What remains of their world is not the fear or the hardship, but the echo of that stubborn, enduring hope. A hope that a single seed, planted in faith, might one day become a forest. We walk through the ruins of their world, a crumbling castle wall, the faint outline of a plowed field, and we see only absence. We read of their beliefs and see only superstition. We tally the famines, the plagues, the staggering infant mortality, and we feel a sense of pity, of relief that we were born into a different age. John's father, in turn, promises that his son will provide for you, that you will have a roof over your head and a share of his family's harvest. Your value in this moment is quantifiable. You are worth 1 cow, 3 blankets, and a patch of dirt. The thought is not insulting. It is simply a fact. as real as the floor beneath your feet. Love was a concept for the poets and the high-born knights and ladies in the songs the troubadours sang. For people like you, marriage was about survival. This system reveals the medieval belief that the spiritual and physical worlds were deeply intertwined. God was not a distant observer. He was an active participant in human affairs, expected to show his hand on demand. For the powerful, the ordeal was a magnificent tool of social control, outsourcing their authority to the heavens. For the common man, it was a terrifying lottery. Was this constant, externally imposed rhythm a form of oppression, or did it provide a kind of deep psychological relief, the comfort of knowing exactly what comes next, even if it's only more hardship? Your hands are never clean. They are chapped, calloused, and perpetually stained from dye, dirt, or blood. This is a woman's work, the ceaseless, invisible labor that holds the fragile world of your home together. The men plow the fields, their work visible, celebrated at harvest. Their labor is the skeleton of survival. Then, a splash of cold water and a hurried prayer. The priest's Latin charm against the damnation of original sin. He was paid in eggs. You lie still, listening to the child's breathing. It is a fragile rhythm, a flutter against the immense, crushing silence of the pre-dawn world. Is she strong enough? The question is not one of love, not yet. It is a brutal calculation of survival. Love is a luxury that comes after the first winter, after the fever sweats have passed, after the child has proven it intends to stay. He complains of a sharp, biting pain, a coldness that settles deep in his joints whenever the rains come. But he does not speak of aging bones. He speaks of an imp, a mischievous, spiteful creature of the fens and damp hollows that has taken up residence in his knees. He claims he can feel it pinching his sinews, laughing with the creak of his every step. Again, you do not dismiss him. You know his pain is real, as tangible as the mud on his boots. He is dragged before the manorial court, held not in a stone courthouse, but in the Lord's great hall. There is no jury of your peers. The judge is the Lord's steward, a man whose loyalty is to his master, not to justice. The accuser is the Lord's reeve. The witnesses are other tenants, terrified of saying anything that might anger the man who controls their land, their labor, and their lives. The young man swears his innocence, but his words are weightless. He is a serf. His word against the Lord's is like a feather against a stone. If you follow the rules, if you say a prayer when you hear a crow, if you avoid crossing a black cat, if you carry a hagstone in your pocket, you might just be able to influence the outcome. It gives you a sliver of agency in a life that has almost none. Look at the cause and effect here. The fear of the unknown, of random calamity, is so immense that it must be contained. These rituals are a form of folk religion, a practical magic for the powerless. They are the daily negotiations with fate. This is the currency of your world, loyalty sworn in blood and enforced by the threat of its spilling. If your brother is attacked on the road, it is not his fight alone. It is your fight. It is your father's, your uncle's, your cousin's. An insult to one is an insult to the clan, and the response must be swift and public, or you will all be seen as weak. This web of kinship is your strength, but it is also your cage. You are defined not by who you are, but by whose you are. The first sound you hear is not the rooster, but the scraping of your own fingernails against the frost on the inside of the wall. It's a sound that promises another day of cold bones, and the gnawing, familiar emptiness in your belly. Outside, the world is a smear of gray, waiting for a sun it isn't sure will arrive. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This isn't a story of kings in their castles or knights in shining armor. Back then, they had another name for it, a word that was taking on a new and terrible weight: witchcraft. Ask yourself, when the same hands that deliver a child can be accused of cursing a cow, how do you walk through the world? Is your skill a gift from a forgotten god, or a sin waiting for a name? As you step out into the mud-slicked night, the cold is a physical blow, seeping instantly through your thin wool tunic. The man, a farmer named Thomas, whose hands are usually steady on a plow, stumbles ahead. His flickering tallow lamp casts monstrous, dancing shadows that writhe on the daub walls of the surrounding huts. Every closed door you pass feels like a watching eye. They are all sleeping now, but tomorrow they will all know. News in this village travels faster than sickness. Every success you ever had is now rewritten as evidence against you. The fever you broke for the blacksmith's boy last spring, proof you hold power over the hot and the cold, the living and the dead. The poultice that saved a woodsman's leg from festering, unnatural magic. No one remembers that you sat with them, cleaned their wounds, spoke soft words of comfort. They only remember the outcome, and in this new, sour light, it seems impossible. It seems diabolical. This is the terrible fragility of your world. This syncretism was the fundamental reality of medieval folk belief. People saw no contradiction in praying to the Virgin Mary for a safe childbirth, and then leaving a small offering of milk by the hearth for the domovoi, the household spirits, to ensure they didn't curdle the rest or sour the mood of the home. You attend Mass on Sunday, feeling the awe of the Latin chants and the scent of incense, and then on Tuesday, you use a pagan-sounding charm your grandmother taught you to find a lost sickle in the fields. You didn't see a conflict, you saw a toolkit. Their lives were not rehearsals for our own, but complete and complex worlds in themselves, filled with a richness of experience we can barely imagine. Their survival was a daily act of courage. Their faith was a shield against a terrifying darkness. Their legacy is not in what they built to last forever, but in the million small acts they performed to simply make it to the next day. You know him only by sight. His stooped shoulders, the quiet way he handles his family's ox. There is no talk of love, of compatibility, of affection. This is not a union of hearts. It is a treaty between two families. The negotiation is a delicate, tense affair that takes place over several evenings and many mugs of ale. It is a transaction. Your father offers a dowry, your family's second-best cow, 3 woolen blankets you wove yourself, and a small, precious plot of land near the river. The community needs a resolution, an end to the dispute that threatens to tear it apart. The ordeal provides a definitive, divinely sanctioned answer, regardless of the earthly facts. It transfers the burden of judgment from fallible humans to an infallible God. The historical melancholy of the scene is overwhelming. We know that the outcome has nothing to do with guilt or innocence, and everything to do with luck, hygiene, and the random chance of infection. A man's life and reputation hang on the behavior of bacteria in an open wound. This lack of personal time created a different kind of mind, one less focused on individual progress and more on communal endurance. The irony is that in their rigid, structured world, they may have been more present. Without the distraction of a future they could control, they were forced to inhabit the moment they were in. The ache in their back, the warmth of the sun, the toll of the bell. A wet, shallow thing from the small bundle of straw and wool beside you, your daughter. The midwife, Agnes, her face a road map of winters, had held the child up to the weak candlelight 3 nights ago. A girl, she'd said, her voice flat. An observation, not a celebration. A girl is another mouth, a dowry to be found, a vessel for sons someone else will claim. You watched Agnes dip her thumb in salt and touch it to the infant's lips, a folk ritual to ward off the fae, the demons who steal the unbaptized. You tell the mother to hang this from the crib, to let its sacred grain stand sentinel over her son's sleep. She watches, her breathing slowing with every curl of wood that falls to the floor. You have given her something to do, a ritual to pit against the formless dread. She leaves not with a cure, but with a weapon. Later, as the evening damp seeps through the walls, an old man shuffles in, leaning heavily on a hazel staff. His knuckles are swollen, his knees gnarled like the roots of an ancient oak. It is a fear so profound it eclipses God himself. Section 14. The Lord's Justice. A crime has been committed. One of the Lord's deer has been killed in the forest. This is not just theft, it is poaching, a direct affront to the Lord's authority, for the beasts of the forest belong to him, not to the common folk who starve in winter. A suspect is found, a young man from your village, seen near the woods with a bow. Every unexplained event, every stroke of bad luck is evidence of this ongoing war. This is the psychology of a world without science. Without germ theory, disease is a punishment from God or a curse from a demon. Without meteorology, a sudden storm is a sign of divine anger. Superstition is not ignorance. It is a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic and terrifying world. It is a set of rules for a game you don't understand. Your cousin is not just a relative. He is a potential ally in a land dispute, an extra sword arm in a feud. Your marriage was not about love. It was about merging your family's half-acre with your husband's, creating a bond of property and mutual defense. You live surrounded by them. Your uncle's hovel is a stone's throw away. Your sister-in-law's is just beyond that. There are no secrets. Everyone knows who is feuding with whom, whose daughter is promised to whose son, and who owes a blood debt. The invisible sickness, or the sin of being sick. Each plant has a purpose, a spirit, a story whispered from one generation of women to the next. This intimate knowledge is a science, but one that is feminine, oral, and rooted in the earth. It is a power that exists entirely outside the formal, written structures of men. And in this world, any power held by a woman that isn't granted by a husband or sanctioned by the church is inherently suspicious. It is a rogue current in a river that is meant to flow only one way. Today, we would call your knowledge botany or pharmacology. The air in your one-room wattle and daub hut is thick with your trade. The sharp scent of dried yarrow for staunching blood, the earthy smell of comfrey for mending bone, and the faint, sweet smoke of last night's meager peat fire. You grab your leather satchel, its contents more precious than gold, a small, sharp knife your mother used before you, honed to a razor's edge, bundles of dried raspberry leaf to ease a womb's struggle. and a small clay pot of goose fat, a balm for the body's most brutal passages, a respected craft. Now, that respect is curdling into suspicion. When the summer sickness arrives, swift and merciless, it sweeps through the village and takes 2 children in a week. Their mothers, women you shared bread with, now look at you with eyes that are hard stones. They see you tending your garden, your fingers stained with the green of nettle and the purple of foxglove. They see you whispering to the leaves, gathering roots by the light of the moon as your own mother taught you. What were once words of healing now sound like incantations. Your finger, damp with dew from the water pail, traces a quick sign of the cross over the remedy before you apply it to your husband's festering wound. It is a gesture that placates the village priest, should he hear of it. But more than that, you believe, truly believe, that it adds another layer of divine power to the work of the yarrow. It seals the charm. Your world is not divided into neat, tidy categories of religion and superstition. It is a messy, potent, bubbling stew of both. It is in the recipe for a healing poultice passed from mother to daughter. It is in the sturdy design of a tool honed over centuries of use that was repaired and passed down until it finally broke for good. These were people who understood, in a way we have perhaps forgotten, that they were temporary custodians of a world they had to pass on. We inherit the fruits of their labor, the resilience of their bloodlines, the foundations of their laws and language. Yet we rarely think of them. They are the invisible architects of our world. You are not just a healer of physical ailments. You are a reader of stories, a restorer of harmony. In a world without answers, was this holistic view, born of ignorance, a more humane way to approach the mystery of human suffering? Your father, his hands gnarled like old roots, tells you it is time. Not time for you to marry, but time for a marriage to be arranged. You are 16. You have shared maybe a dozen words with the boy in question, John, the son of a man from the next village whose fields border your father's. He truly believes that God will intervene, that a miracle will protect him. The priest blesses the iron, sprinkling it with holy water, which sizzles and evaporates instantly. William takes a deep breath, his lips moving in silent prayer, and takes the glowing metal in his hand. A collective gasp goes through the crowd. You can smell the searing flesh. He stumbles through his 9 paces, his face contorted in agony, and drops the iron. His hand is immediately wrapped by the priest. This is justice. It is not about discovering the truth. It is about restoring order. It is the metronome of your labor, the constant reminder of your duties and obligations. There is no 5 more minutes. There is no hitting snooze. There is only the bell and the work that must follow. We think of time as a resource to be managed, saved, or wasted. For them, time was a current to be swept along in. It was cyclical, not linear. The year was a wheel, turning from planting to harvest, from Advent to Lent, always returning to the same points. We seek to understand how terror shaped ritual, how hunger rewrote morality, and how, in a world of profound uncertainty, a single prayer could feel like a shield. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin. And live the life they never got to finish. The first sound is not a rooster, but a cough. You lead her to the hearth and take the shrieking bundle into your arms. You look into the baby's red, scrunched-up face, and then you turn to your collection of woods by the fire. You select a small, smooth branch of rowan, the tree that bleeds red berries and holds the thunder's power. With a small, sharp knife, you begin to carve, not an elaborate shape, but a simple, protective sigil, a cross within a circle. Each slow scrape of the blade is a deliberate act, a prayer made of wood and steel. This is how the world ends, you think. Not with a bang, but with a rumor. The fear of the plague is almost as devastating as the plague itself. It dissolves the bonds of community, replacing trust with suspicion and charity with a desperate, primal instinct for self-preservation. You check your own children for any sign of fever. You listen to the sound of your own breathing. The enemy is no longer a band of raiders or a harsh winter. It is the very air you breathe, the touch of a loved one, the story told by a stranger. And so, your life is a tapestry of tiny defensive rituals. The priest warns of Satan's grand temptations, pride, lust, greed, but you are more concerned with his everyday mischief. It is a demon, you believe, that sours the milk. It is an imp that hides your sewing needle. It is the breath of a malevolent spirit in the night fog that gives a child a fever. The universe is a battleground between the forces of God and the legions of hell, and your small, insignificant life is one of the skirmishes. Was it faith that saved them, or the fear of abandoning what had always worked? The line is so blurry, it may as well not exist at all. Section 5. Blood and Belonging. The concept of family as you know it, a cozy private unit, does not exist here. Your family is a sprawling, messy, and brutally pragmatic network of obligation. It is your kin, your blood, and in a world with no police force, no social safety net, it is the only real security you have. You simply provide a container for the pains that have no name, absorbing the grief that the village has mistaken for sin. You are a keeper of the village's silent screams. In a world where the body's labor is the only coin that matters, there is no room for a weary soul. But the need is here, a hollow ache in this boy, a testament to the truth that the heart can break long after the bones have mended. Ask yourself, in a world that names every demon but cannot name despair, what is the heavier burden? When a child, careless in his play, stumbles into a patch of stinging nettles, a poultice from this boiled root is the only thing that can soothe the burning itch and silence his cries. Further on, a thicket of wild raspberries, a man's silhouette fills the frame, panting, a ragged shape cut from the moonless dark. "It's my Elsbeth," he gasps, his voice a ragged edge of fear. "The babe, it will not come." You do not ask questions. The time for questions is a luxury for priests and reeves. You are already moving, your bare feet finding the familiar cold of the packed earth floor. The prize of John Fletcher's small herd, giving birth in the night. But there is no bleeding cry, only a strained silence. The calf is stillborn, its limbs twisted into an unnatural knot. Another omen. The whispers start then, quiet as the rustle of mice in the thatch. They are poison in the well of community. Last week, you were Goody Alice, the one they sought when a fever took hold or a birthing was difficult. Your knowledge of herbs, of willow bark for pain, of comfrey for knitting bones, of yarrow to staunch a bleeding wound, was a gift. It is half a Christian prayer to Saint Luke, the physician, asking for his holy intercession. It is half a much older rhyme a low chant to the spirit of the plant itself, asking it to lend its strength, to wake from its slumber and perform its duty. You feel no conflict in this. One does not cancel the other. It is an alliance. When the poultice is ready, a fragrant, earthy smear on a strip of clean linen, you pause. That single act of planting, that one moment of defiant hope, has rippled through generations. It has provided sustenance, comfort, and continuity. John is long gone, his bones dust in the churchyard, but the tree remains. It is his true monument. This is the quiet legacy of the Middle Ages. It is not found in the grand narratives, but in the small, anonymous acts of creation and preservation. It is in the stone wall, built by a dozen hands, that still marks the edge of a field. You were not draining life. You were draining the imbalance that was threatening life. We now have MRI scans and blood tests that offer incredible specificity, that can pinpoint a single rogue cell. But in doing so, we sometimes lose sight of the patient as a whole person, a complex system of mind, body, and spirit. Your medieval counterpart had no choice but to see the whole, reading the story of the sickness as it was written on the entire landscape of the body. William, the accused, will be made to carry a blessed, red-hot piece of iron for 9 paces. His hand will then be bound and sealed with the priest's wax seal. In 3 days, the bandage will be removed. If the wound is healing cleanly, God has declared him innocent. If it is festering and infected, God has proclaimed his guilt. You watch as the iron is heated in a fire, the blacksmith chanting a prayer as he works the bellows. You see the look on William's face, a mask of terror and desperate piety. Finally, Compline, the last prayer of the day, a final toll that releases you into the darkness and the quiet terror of the night. This rhythm is absolute, inescapable. It governs every aspect of life. A contract is agreed upon before the Vespers bell. A child is born between prime and terce. The bell tower is the true heart of the village, its voice the only authority that unites everyone. It is a sound of comfort, a reminder of order and divine presence in a chaotic world, but it is also a sound of control. We are not here to judge their world by the standards of our own, but to step inside it, to feel the cold that seeps through the walls, to understand the raw, immediate fear of a bad harvest, and to touch the desperate, beautiful shape of their faith. This is Sleepy History. We don't just learn about the past, we inhabit it. We listen for the whispers they left behind in their tools, their superstitions, and their bones. We explore the world not through dates and battles, but through the lived experience of survival. The evil eye, she whispers, her voice cracking. Old man Hemlock's widow. She stared at him in the market yesterday. Just stared, and he has not stopped screaming since. She looks at you, her gaze pleading. She is not asking for a remedy for colic. She is asking for an exorcism. You do not argue. You do not speak of sour milk or trapped wind. To her, the child's gut is a battlefield where a curse has taken root. Logic is a useless balm for a spiritual wound. Instead, you nod gravely, your silence a vessel for her fear. There is only the word of a traveler, a merchant, a pilgrim, and in this vacuum of certainty, fear creates its own reality. The village turns inward. The gates are barred. Strangers are driven away with stones. Old superstitions are revived with a new, desperate fervor. People begin to look at their neighbors with suspicion. Did Joanna, the widow, look upon someone with an evil eye? Did the blacksmith fail to say his prayers with sufficient vigor? When the enemy is invisible, faceless, and divinely ordained, the terror turns inward. It seeks a human face to blame. Section 9. The Devil in the Details. You never walk under a ladder. You throw a pinch of spilled salt over your left shoulder. You nail a horseshoe over your doorway, points facing up, so the luck doesn't run out. These are not quaint habits. They are your armor. The world you inhabit is not empty. It is teeming with unseen forces, with mischievous sprites, malevolent demons, and the restless spirits of the dead. The devil is not an abstract concept. He is a real, physical presence, constantly seeking a crack through which to enter your life. Christianity is the official language, but the old pagan grammar still shapes the sentences. The church provides the saints, but the people decide what powers they have, often mapping them directly onto the older gods of the harvest, the forest, and the well. It's a practical, spiritual hedging of bets. Why rely on one god when you can have the protection of two? This blending of beliefs isn't heresy. It's a form of insurance, a deeply human refusal to abandon the traditions that have kept your ancestors alive for 1,000 years. He speaks of the last wet harvest, of finding his father in the mud, his face as blue as the storm that took him. He speaks of Alara, the weaver's daughter, whose laughter was once the only music he heard, and how it now belongs to a boy with more land. His story spills out, not a flood, but a slow leak from a cracked vessel. You offer no solutions. You do not tell him God has a plan, or that his father is in a better place, or that other girls exist. Those are words for the healthy. You run your fingers over the soft, fuzzy leaves of a mullein plant, like stroking the ear of a lamb. You know its secret. Dried and steeped in hot water, its tea can quiet the most racking, desperate cough, the kind that sounds like a death rattle in the small chest of a child in the dead of winter. A few feet away, you spot the broad leaves of a dock plant. You kneel, digging with your fingers into the rich soil, pulling up its gnarled, yellow root. This is the antidote. It isn't the polite, hesitant rap of a neighbor borrowing a pinch of salt. It is the frantic, splintering fist of desperation against your oak door. You are the village healer, the cunning woman, the one they turn to when God seems too far away and the priest's prayers have failed to soothe a fever. Your knowledge is a river, flowing from your mother and her mother before her, a current of secrets that the church fears and the people need. Before you can rise, the wooden bolt on your door groans, protesting its violation. The wheat, which should stand tall and golden, a testament to God's favor and a year's hard labor, is sickly and stunted. Blackened husks hang where heavy grains should be, dusted with a foul-smelling powder that stains the fingers. It is a blight, a curse. The men return from the fields with their shoulders slumped, their faces grim with a vocabulary of fear you know all too well. They speak of God's wrath, of a hidden sin in the village that has soured the soil. Then comes the cow. Thump, scrape, thump. In the low light of your cottage, you lean over a heavy stone mortar, your body a curve of concentration. You are crushing herbs. The sharp green scent of yarrow fills the air, a promise to staunch a flow of blood. The deeper, woody smell of willow bark follows, a whisper of relief for a fevered brow. As your stone pestle grinds the plant fibers into a dark, damp paste, you murmur. The words are a quiet river flowing from two different springs. At the time, it seemed like a foolish boast, a prayer against the relentless uncertainty of the world. Now the tree is a landmark. It is a source of shade in the summer, of fruit in the autumn, of firewood in the winter when a branch falls. Your grandchildren climb its sturdy limbs. The apples it produces, small and tart, are a staple of your diet. They are baked into pies, pressed into cider, and stored in the cellar to last through the hunger moon. The pain in his side is not a localized problem to be surgically removed. It is a symptom of a systemic storm, a sign that the hot, moist humor of blood is in excess. The cure, then, is to restore balance. You might prescribe cooling, drying herbs like willow bark. You might recommend a diet of bland, cold foods like cucumbers or fish. And if the case is severe, you might recommend bleeding, opening a vein to let the excess humor out. It seems barbaric to us, but in their framework, it was perfectly logical. 2 days ago, your neighbor Thomas accused another man, William, of moving the boundary stone between their fields in the dead of night, stealing a precious sliver of land. There were no witnesses. It is one man's word against another's. In your world, there is no forensic evidence, no concept of beyond a reasonable doubt. There is only the judgment of God as interpreted by men. The entire village gathers in the field. The reeve, acting on behalf of the Lord, declares that this will be settled by trial by ordeal, specifically, trial by hot iron. It belongs to God, to the seasons, and to the Lord of the manor. The day unfolds in a sequence of liturgical hours, each marked by a bell from the stone church that dominates the landscape. Prime, the first hour of daylight. Terce, mid-morning, when the sun is high enough to burn off the frost. Sext, noon, the call to a meager lunch of bread and ale. Nones, mid-afternoon, the beginning of the end of the day's labor. And then vespers, as the sun begins to dip below the hills, a signal to drive the animals back to the pen. The first splinter of light catches the frost on the inside of the window shutter. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This isn't a story of kings, queens, or knights in shining armor. Their histories are carved in stone and bound in gilded books. This is the story of the rest, the vast, silent majority. The farmer, the midwife, the weaver, the child who never saw their 10th year. It's a story written in sweat, mud, and the quiet rhythm of the seasons. Section 9. The Unseen World. The knock on your door isn't a polite request. It's a frantic, desperate drumming that echoes the panic in a young mother's heart. You unlatch the heavy oak, and she stumbles in, clutching a wailing infant wrapped in thin wool. Her face is a mask of exhaustion, her eyes wide with a terror that goes beyond sleeplessness. The baby's cry is a thin, relentless needle of sound, the kind that frays the very edges of sanity. But it is not the noise she fears. It is the silence she imagines will follow. It is whispered at the mill, murmured over the fire, debated in the alehouse. Information does not travel in newspapers or dispatches. It travels by mouth. It is a living, mutating thing, growing more monstrous with each retelling. The black swellings become the size of apples. The death toll rises from dozens to hundreds. Stories emerge of dogs and cats falling dead in the street, of fields left to rot, of entire families wiped out between one sunset and the next. There is no way to verify the information. It's a gift that, in the wrong season, under the wrong circumstances, could be used as evidence to hang you. A failed harvest, a sudden plague among the cattle, a stillborn child. In times of fear, people don't look for reasons. They look for someone to blame. And the woman who lives apart, who whispers to her herbs, who seems to hold a power outside of God's established order, she is the easiest target. Your healing hands could be reframed as cursing hands. Your secret knowledge, the very thing that gives you purpose, could become the kindling for your own pyre. You run your hand over the cold, mossy surface of the megalith, feeling the deep grooves of the ancient, pre-Christian carvings beneath the shallow scratch of the cross. You don't pray to the Christian God, not here. You whisper to the stone itself, to the spirit your grandmother swore lived within it, to Saint Gundred, who might just be the old goddess in a more acceptable dress. You leave a small bowl of the cow's sour milk as an offering. This is how faith truly works here. It's not a clean theological system. It's a messy, layered thing, a palimpsest. You give him a tea made from St. John's wort, the sunshine herb, what the old ones call fuga daemonum, the demon chaser. It is a small ritual, a physical answer for an invisible problem. But you know the herb is not the true medicine. The medicine is the quiet, the warmth, the unspoken permission you grant him. You sit with him, and in the silence, you listen. And eventually, he speaks. The words come out cracked and slow, like stones from a frozen field. This is your true church, your only library, where the priest sees only a chaotic tangle of green, a mere backdrop for the grand drama of man and his God. You see a living text. You see a vocabulary of cures. You walk not with the hurried step of an errand runner, but with the slow, deliberate pace of a reader scanning a shelf for a specific volume. Your eyes, trained by your mother and hers before you, don't just see leaves. They see shapes, textures, and purposes. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. Title: The Knock at Midnight. You are pulled from a shallow sleep, not by a sound, but by a feeling, a vibration in the dirt floor that travels through your straw mattress and into your very bones. It is the earth shudder of a running man. Then comes the knock. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. A subtle shift in music, a deeper, more intimate tone begins. The narration becomes more personal and direct. The change is not a sudden storm, but a slow chilling of the air. It begins in the fields. We will feel the chill, hear the whispers, and understand the brutal logic of a life balanced on the edge of a knife. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The sacred and the profane. The sound is a dull, rhythmic crunch. For most, it is smaller, quieter, and far more profound. You stand in the small orchard behind your house. In the center is an apple tree, its bark thick and gnarled, its branches reaching for the sky like an old man's arms in prayer. You remember the day your husband John planted it, a thin sapling bought at a market, for a price you both thought extravagant. He had dug the hole with his own hands, his back bent, turning over the same soil his father and grandfather had worked. He said, "This will feed our children's children." You feel the heat of his skin, not with a thermometer, but with the back of your hand, comparing his forehead to your own. You note the color of his tongue, the yellow tinge in the whites of his eyes. You listen to the rhythm of his breath, the wet rattle in his chest. This was diagnostic art, a form of full-body cartography without charts. It was holistic by absolute necessity. You couldn't isolate a single variable, a single pathogen, so you had to read the entire system. Faith, in this context, is not belief without proof. It is a choice. It is the decision to trust in the story, because the alternative, a silent, empty heaven, is simply too terrifying to contemplate. Was it the relic that gave Eleanor peace, or the act of the journey itself, the feeling of having done something in the face of absolute helplessness? The Lord's reeve rides into the village, his horse a head taller than any animal you own. He is here to dispense justice. The first bell of the day, matins, rings long before dawn, a deep bronze toll that vibrates through the frozen mud and timber frames of the village. It is a call to God, but it is also a call to work. It tells you it is time to rise, to stoke the embers of the fire, to face the day. You don't own a clock. No one you know owns a clock. The very concept of personal, private time is an alien one. Your time is not your own. This economy makes you not just a healer, but a kin member to the entire village, bound by a web of favors that is both a safety net and a cage. Ask yourself, when the harvest fails and the church bell tolls for the hungry, what is true security? A Lord's silver coin that buys nothing from an empty market, or the certain knowledge that your neighbor will share their last hardened loaf of bread? This fragile trust is all that stands between your village and the silence of the snows. But every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now take for granted. A traveling friar, stopping for a night, speaks of a town 3 days to the east, a town where people began coughing blood, where black swellings appeared in their armpits, and where the death bell tolled without ceasing until there was no one left strong enough to ring it. The friar calls it the Great Pestilence, a scourge sent by God to punish the sins of mankind. He crosses himself, his eyes wide with a terror that is far more contagious than any prayer. The word spreads through the village like a contagion itself. The Lord has his sword, the priest has his cross, but you have the earth. You know its secrets. This self-sufficiency is a quiet rebellion. You do not need a man's permission to heal. You do not need a priest's blessing to know that willow bark eases pain. This makes you useful, but it also makes you a threat. Your knowledge is not written in any holy book. It was not learned in any university. It comes from women, from the earth, from observation. It is a power they cannot control, and that is the danger. So they did the next best thing. They carved a crude cross into its face and declared it a holy site, dedicated to a conveniently obscure local saint, Saint Gundred, a woman said to have cured plagues with a touch. You tie a strip of cloth from your own dress to a branch of the gnarled hawthorn tree growing beside the stone. It joins dozens of other faded, fluttering rags, prayers made of fabric, offerings of hope. You see a soul drowning in plain sight. You call him inside, away from the judging eyes and the whispers that follow him like burrs. The air in your cottage is thick with the scent of dried yarrow and chamomile. You do not ask what ails him. The question is a blunt instrument for a wound this delicate. Instead, you move to the hearth, stoking the embers, and put a kettle over the flame. He sits on the stool you offer, his hands limp in his lap, his body a heavy sack of bones. The wheel of cheese is cool and heavy in your satchel, a solid, tangible reward for a night spent wrestling a new life into the world. The baby girl, red and screaming, was healthy. The mother, exhausted but alive, will be sore for a week. A success. As you leave the cloying, human smells of the village behind, the smoke, the waste, the sweat of bodies packed too close, you walk into the woods. The air changes instantly. It is cooler here, smelling of damp earth and decaying leaves. A scent of life and death, held in perfect, silent balance. We will walk through the mud of their villages, feel the gnawing ache of their hunger, and understand the terror and wonder that shaped their world. Here we look for history, not in the chronicles of lords, but in the texture of a wool tunic, the weight of a superstition, and the echo of a prayer said in the dark. It is the story of survival, when the veil between worlds was thin, and every shadow held a meaning. If you love immersive, it is the story of the 99% who lived and died without ever leaving a mark on a map, their names dissolving like breath on a winter morning. We will walk in their footsteps, feel the gnawing hunger in their bellies, and touch the rough weave of their faith. We will explore the world through their eyes, a world where every shadow held a spirit, every sickness was a moral verdict, and every prayer was a desperate bargain for one more sunrise. This is history from the inside out, not what was done, but what it felt like. Here, in the quiet, desperate theater of daily life, survival is the only epic. Faith is not a gentle, abstract thing. It is a shield. Superstition is not ignorance. It is a map of unseen dangers, drawn by generations of fear. We will walk through the world as they did, a world lit by tallow candles and terror, where God's divine plan felt agonizingly close, but the older, darker things that lived in the woods and the water felt closer still. This is history, not from a textbook, but from the inside out. As the Vespers bell begins to toll, signaling the end of another day, you look at the fields, at the forest, at the stone church, and you make a simple prayer. It is the prayer of the anonymous, the countless millions who lived and died and were forgotten. It is a prayer of quiet acceptance. Did they fear being forgotten? Or was the promise of heaven's memory the only legacy they ever truly needed? The legacy of a life is rarely what you think it will be. It is not the battle won or the cathedral built. The air is thick with the scent of dried yarrow and chamomile. You don't have a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff. Your tools are your senses, honed by years of observation. You begin your diagnosis. First, you inspect the color and smell of his urine, holding the glass flask up to the light. The piss prophet is a common, if crude, name for what you do. Is it too dark, too cloudy, too sweet? Each sign points to a different humoral excess. It is a way of imposing a human narrative onto the random cruelty of fate. The irony is that the trade in relics was rife with fraud. For every true bone of a saint, there were 100 fakes. Pig bones sold as martyrs' knuckles, splinters of common wood sold as pieces of the true cross. You have heard whispers of this, but you push the thought away. To doubt the relic is to doubt the entire system. It is to accept that you are truly alone, with no powerful friends in the court of heaven. In that moment, the entire social fabric of the village feels terrifyingly thin. The person outside is not evil. They are hungry, just like you. He is a mirror of your own desperation. Ask yourself, when your child is crying from hunger, and you know your neighbor has a single sack of grain left, where is the line between sin and survival? Does God judge a thief whose family is starving? Or is the greater sin to watch them die? And the world is not measured in hours and minutes. It is measured in bells. You are accepting their future fevers, their birthing pains, their sorrows yet to come. This creates a profound, if terrifyingly fragile, interdependence. Unlike the cold, sterile anonymity of money, your payment has a face. It has a history of aching backs and a future promise of shared meals. The fish came from Thomas, whose youngest daughter you helped through the bloody flux. The firewood was from old Elspeth, whose sight is failing, but whose memory of debts is as sharp as a needle. We see that the foundations of our society, our laws, our languages, our beliefs, were not given to us. They were forged slowly and painfully in the crucible of their daily lives. And what remains of them is more than we think. It's in the nursery rhymes that hide a dark history, in the superstitions we still cling to, in the deep, ancestral memory of what it means to be hungry, to be afraid, and to endure. They are the silent crowd of witnesses standing behind us. They had no legacy carved in stone. They could simply be one more mouth to feed in a long winter. There is an irony here. The traveling merchant is welcomed for his goods, the pilgrim for his piety. But the lone individual, unattached and unexplained, is the ultimate threat. He reminds them of the chaos that lies just beyond their parish boundaries, a chaos they hold at bay with ritual, with faith, and with a deep, unshakable suspicion of anything new. The rumor of plague, it begins not with a symptom, but with a story. You are the one they come to in the dead of night, when the priest's prayers have failed. A farmer with a festering wound, a mother with a colicky baby, a young woman desperate to undo a moment's mistake. You offer them poultices, tinctures, and teas. You offer them a chance. This gives you a strange, respected, and feared independence. You may not own land, but you command a different kind of power, the power over life and death. In a world built on rigid hierarchies, where every person has a designated place, your power is fluid and uncomfortably autonomous. Under the cover of dusk, you lead the cow not to the church, but to the old standing stone at the edge of the village, the one the elders call the hag's tooth. The stone was here long before the church, a gray finger pointing to the sky. The priests tried to have it torn down centuries ago, but the villagers resisted. But his eyes hold the flat, gray light of a winter river, and you know this sickness well. It is the ailment with no name. The village sees a sturdy back gone soft. He does not work. He sits by the river, watching the water carry the world away. They call him lazy, a drain on the parish. The priest, in his Sunday sermon, speaks of acedia, the sin of spiritual sloth, a demon that whispers idleness into a good Christian's ear, making the soul a workshop for the devil. They see a moral failing, a choice. We now wield antiseptics with casual ease, but forget the sheer courage it took to intervene in the body's processes with nothing but folk wisdom and a prayer. Ask yourself, when the only thing separating life from death is a splash of wine and a prayer, is it skill that saves them, or is it merely chance? The first prayer of the day is not to God, but to the sun, a desperate plea for it to rise, to burn away the damp chill that clings to your bones like a shroud. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This isn't a history of gilded kings, of tapestries and tourneys. This is sleepy history. It is a journey into the quiet, desperate, and deeply human lives of the 99% who were born, who survived, and who vanished, leaving behind only whispers.